There's a bit of confusion about what this book's title is. According to the interior title page and online marketing copy, it's Avatar, a confidential report on the biological and social history of Pandora. However, on the cover, which is unalluring to the point that it looks like an unofficial amateur product, but on this cover and spine, the title appears to be Avatar, an activist survival guide. Due to its visual prominence and being far less wordy, an activist survival guide seems to be the more popular choice fans use to refer to it, including myself, even if it isn't perhaps technically the official title. But obviously someone on the design or marketing team got some crossed signals, with no one at all on the editorial or publishing team actually paying attention either. This sort of sloppy handling is a trait shared by all the books that were inexplicably rushed to be released ahead of the movie in 2009. However, the biggest difference with this survival guide is that, despite some rough edges, it's actually good. The other tie-in books, the art book, the scrapbook, and the novella were just the most pathetic, lazy excuse of movie merchandising, with the biggest disappointment being the measly page count and content, whereas this one feels like a proper book with a much more satisfactory 220 pages and worthy content to match. Essentially, this is an encyclopedia-type lore book for Avatar, but the best part is that rather than just being a straight-up info dump, it's done in an in-world style, which just makes it so much more fun, engaging, and creative. So the premise is that this book is made by and for activists on Earth to disseminate information about Pandora, which has come from smuggled RDA research and reports. And then there's also some handwritten notes from some previous activist. We never learn who wrote these notes, nor are they particularly meaningful, but I like them anyway, and when certain parts of the text have been highlighted, as it gives it a second-hand feel that adds to the immersion, like you happened upon it somewhere or it's been passed around to you. I love when lore books take the in-world approach, and it's been used to this book's immense benefit here. As for what it covers, the best way to give you an idea is to simply go over the contents page. So we've got astronomy and geology, Na'vi physiology and culture, fauna of Pandora, flora of Pandora, human technology of Pandora, RDA Weapons Guide, Glossary, and Na'vi English Dictionary. Then within each of those chapters you get very short, basic encyclopedia-type entries for each of the objects, creatures, concepts, or whatever that falls under those categories. The text and information itself ranges. Sometimes it's text that is just superficial descriptions or otherwise uninteresting, but that is thankfully overshadowed by the amount of really good text and information. Even though each entry is very short and can sometimes feature a little too much frivolous fluff, it still contains tons of rich details and information not revealed in the movie. Now, this book is not about broadening the world building established in the movie. Except for a couple of hints here and there, this is not about exploring or establishing any sort of Avatar expanded universe. It's all focused very closely through the scope of what you see on screen, but the best thing about the text that lore fans will really appreciate is that, unlike what you see for most lazy books of this kind, it hasn't been done in a way that pointlessly retreads the same ground as the movie, but rather enhances it for fans by adding depth and detail to what you see on screen. And it's for this reason the book stands out as being handled as an almost perfect companion to the movie, because it's not just regurgitating the movie, it's using the book for an actual purpose to do those things that the movie doesn't have time or ability to do. As you may know, James Cameron and company spent a lot of time creating believable and obsessively thought out world building, and I assume this book is based on their production bible and documents. But obviously in the movie, you can't stop the story every 5 seconds to explain the features and minutiae of everything you see. Therein lies the function, purpose, and value of this book, and again, why I think so highly of it as a great and rewarding supplement to the movie. Having a book that is a more expansive look at this world would have been awesome too, but even though this book is just all about world building on a specific, limited, and microscopic level, it's nonetheless rewarding and enjoyable. It allows you to appreciate and learn about not only extra information on things that are prominently featured on the screen, but also even just stuff that was in the background that goes completely unnoticed when you're watching the movie. And then even beyond that, there are a few entries in here on things that don't actually appear in the movie, which is cool. However, there is a very weird flip side to that where more than a few extremely important and prominent subjects are almost or sometimes entirely absent from the book. The social history of Pandora promised in the title is particularly lacking. For example, even though it does mention the astronomical discovery of Pandora, there's nothing about the first human arrival and establishment, nothing about first contact with the Na'vi. The school is only mentioned in passing, maybe a single specific reference to one of the other Na'vi clans. The Tree of Souls is seen but not mentioned, nor are the wood sprites. Hell's Gate is named, but really nothing on the facility. Avatars, i.e. the thing so important that the movie's named after it, only get one page made up of maybe 10 sentences with next to nothing on the history or development of avatars or their creation. Nothing on the Psylinks either. It seems like such a bizarre oversight that the authors would completely ignore such an important piece of fictitious technology, yet includes a whole page to explain Na'vi baby carriers that are exactly the same as they are in real life. However, the omission that I think will most disappoint fans is that, except for a couple of insignificant passing references to Grace, the book does not even mention any of the characters. On the one hand, I actually don't mind this, as it means the book is completely free of the pointless regurgitation of the story and characters, which is what these tie-in books tend to do, but the total absence of the characters feels weird and a missed opportunity to give them some background history via personnel files or something. So while this book does include a lot of stuff, you also need to understand that there is a lot missing, and the solution is that it very simply needed another 50 pages, which was completely doable. I mean, even a second volume would have been, especially once they saw how popular the movie was, because it's not like they didn't have enough to draw from. The Pandorapedia on the Blu-ray is like 450 pages. And this is also why my biggest frustration with the book was when the text was wasted on banal information, though again, that is not a defining characteristic of the predominantly great, interesting text. Having said that, how much value you'll personally get out of this book and how much you'll enjoy reading it obviously depends on how interested you are in the sort of information it reveals. Do you like reading sort of basic encyclopedic entries for fictitious plants, animals, and technology? This book is predominantly focused on numbers and other data for those things. It's a very superficial fact file type approach to the world building. You're not going to find any sort of extended discussion on any sort of larger history or topics. So it's very possible to be a big fan of the movie but find this book extremely uninteresting if you aren't particularly interested in the minutiae of the world, even if you appreciate it. Though to the book's credit, I will say personally that was the camp I thought I was going to be in, that I was just going to skim and skip a lot of stuff because I just don't care about reading dozens of pages on plants and guns and stuff, yet I ended up reading every page and enjoying most of them, which I think speaks very highly to how this book has been handled and written. Because obviously with a book like this, the huge disadvantage is that there's no narrative or character hook driving audience engagement, but the book's been able to achieve that, I found, via featuring such a wide variety of topics. It was also helped through a lot of cross-referencing of the entries. For example, it'll mention how a plant is used by the Na'vi or one of the other animals. It gives a connected, cohesive context to the ecosystem that provides engagement that would have been lost had they been more isolated or less relevant to one another. But really, at its core, for the type of book it's supposed to be, the entries are simply well-written, creative, unique, and interesting. Though it definitely could have used an index, as the organization is a little clunky and unintuitive, because if you try looking for something specific, you can probably work out what chapter it'll be in, but from there you'll have to flick through the whole chapter to find what you're looking for, because it's not organized alphabetically, and sometimes even that won't work, as certain entries are placed in chapters you wouldn't suspect them to be in. The book also benefits greatly from its use of images. I don't get the impression that any of them were created specifically for this book, but rather are all just concept artworks and the occasional crappy-looking 3D models, but no stills from the movie, which was another surprising but welcome example of this book being uncommonly respectful to its audience. What's funny, or I guess sad, is that if you were to strip away all the text from this book, it would still almost be a better art book than the actual art book. It contains almost as many images, though honestly that's more a reflection of just how terrible the art book is. Although this book does mostly feature images already in the art book, there are also a notable number of pieces unique to this book, which is a really nice plus for it. Particularly for any fans who felt the art book was lacking, you get to see a little more here. My favorite were the pieces showing Earth's cyberpunk cities, which I think were completely absent from the art book, and maybe only one piece was featured in the making of book, though it's important to remember that the art here is being used for illustration and effect, rather than being a showcase for the art. So because this book is only the size of a US trade paperback novel, it does mean some of the images are a little smaller than you might like, but honestly, compared to the ridiculously large reproductions in the art book, and considering this style of art, I found the size to be mostly appropriate here. Likewise, because it is going for that scrapbook effect, many of the images are overlapping or cropped, but considering what the book is supposed to be, conceptually more is gained than lost, and so again, I think it's appropriate even if not always ideal. Less easy to justify is that occasionally images seem a little blurry or low quality. I'm not 100% sure if it's the reproduction or the art itself, but I suspect it's probably a mix. Though it's certainly not a widespread issue, there are a couple of cases where it does spoil the visual enjoyment. But like I said at the start, There are plenty of unimpressive telltale signs that this book was rushed and clearly could have used more polish on most fronts, but I didn't want to focus too much on that stuff as I believe that is eclipsed by the strength of the book's concept, core, and handling in the areas that are most important to its success, which is especially admirable considering how rare a quality that is to see in a tie-in book. And so despite the areas it's lacking or unrefined and could have used greater effort and attention, it's been taken seriously, has the best ideas, and most well done and enjoyable of all the Avatar books produced to date. Speaking of which, I'll go over all the other Avatar lore books, including The Way of Water, in the next review, which is on the very similar Avatar movie scrapbook.